Now let's begin. The smell of antiseptic and industrial floor cleaner hit Grant right the moment he stepped through the front door of his own house. His wife Caroline only deep cleaned when she was anxious or guilty about something. He'd been traveling for 18 hours, Dubai to New York to Hartford, and every muscle in his body ached for his bed. But more than that, he ached to see his son. "Tommy," Grant called out, dropping his luggage in the foyer. The house was too quiet. Usually, by now, he'd hear the electric whir of Tommy's wheelchair, the excited sounds his 7-year-old son made when Grant came home. Tommy had cerebral palsy that affected his motor control and speech, but his mind was sharp as a tack. He communicated through a tablet device, and his teachers said he was reading at a 5th grade level. Caroline emerged from the kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back severely, wearing the expression she used when she was about to deliver bad news and pretend it was good. Behind her, her mother Cecilia Alexander appeared like a shadow, thin-lipped and straight-backed in her St. John knit suit. "Grant, you're home early." Caroline's voice was flat. "My meeting wrapped up ahead of schedule." "Where's Tommy?" Cecilia stepped forward, her pearl necklace catching the light. "Sit down, Grant. We need to discuss some changes we've made." Grant felt his jaw tighten. "What changes?" "Where's my son?" "Don't be dramatic," Cecilia said, walking to the leather chair she'd claimed as her own ever since moving into their guest house 6 months ago after Grant's father-in-law died. "We've enrolled Thomas in a new facility, a place that can actually handle his needs." The words landed like physical blows. Grant looked at Caroline, who wouldn't meet his eyes. "You moved our son to a new school without discussing it with me?" "The Westridge Center," Caroline said, lifting her chin. "It's 3 hours upstate. They specialize in children with severe disabilities. He'll live there during the week, come home on weekends." Grant's blood ran cold. "You sent our 7-year-old son to live in a residential facility 3 hours away while I was overseas for 5 days?" "Someone had to make a decision," Cecilia interjected. "You're never here, Grant. You're always running off to consult for this company or that government agency. Caroline can't be expected to handle everything alone. I work to provide for this family." And Tommy's school was fine. His teachers loved him. He had friends. He was making progress. "He was making a spectacle of himself," Cecilia snapped. "And of this family. Do you know what it's like for Caroline to face the other mothers at pickup when he's making those noises he makes? The stares, the pity? We're the Alexanders. We have a reputation." Grant stared at his mother-in-law, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The cold calculation in her eyes, the way she'd inserted herself into every decision about Tommy's care since his diagnosis 5 years ago. How she'd slowly worked on Caroline, eroding her confidence as a mother, replacing it with shame. "Caroline," Grant said quietly, turning to his wife. "Tell me you didn't sign paperwork to move our son without even calling me." She finally met his gaze, and what Grant saw there made his stomach turn. Not regret. Not guilt. Defiance. "I signed everything yesterday. It's done. And honestly, Grant, he'll be better off without you confusing him with all your grand plans and impossible expectations." She said it with such finality, such conviction, that Grant knew this had been planned. Timed for when he'd be out of the country, too far away to stop it. He could see Cecilia's influence in every word, every gesture. "Westridge," Grant repeated slowly, his mind already working. "The Westridge Center in Sullivan County?" "That's right," Cecilia said with a smile that made Grant want to throw something. "Dr. Helen Marsh runs it. Very exclusive. Cost is quite steep, but I've agreed to cover it from Richard's estate. Consider it our contribution to Thomas's care. Now he'll get the round-the-clock attention he needs, and you and Caroline can finally focus on your marriage. Maybe even give Thomas a normal sibling." The casual cruelty of it, the implication that Tommy was a burden, a mistake, something to be warehoused away, ignited something dangerous in Grant's chest. But he forced his face to remain neutral, even allowed himself a small smile. "Westridge," he said again. "Well, I guess that's decided then." Caroline looked suspicious of his easy acceptance. "You're not going to fight this?" Grant picked up his luggage, suddenly exhausted. "I need to shower and sleep. We'll talk later." As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, he could feel Cecilia's satisfaction radiating behind him. She thought she'd won. They both did. And Grant was going to let them believe it for exactly as long as it took him to dismantle everything they'd built. Because Grant Bright knew the Westridge Center intimately. For years ago, when he was still doing advanced consultation work in assistive technology and communication devices, he'd spent 6 months helping Westridge develop their evaluation protocols. He knew Dr. Helen Marsh, knew her commitment to family-centered care, knew the facility's ironclad policies about parental rights and their mandatory family psychological assessments. Most importantly, he knew that Westridge recorded everything for research and training purposes, with full parental consent required at intake. Cecilia and Caroline had just put his son in the one place where every interaction, every evaluation, every family session would be documented by people Grant trusted. They'd handed him a weapon, wrapped it in a bow, and smiled while doing it. Grant stood under the shower spray, hot water washing away the travel grime, and began to plan. He'd learned in his years working with behavioral analysis systems and complex family dynamics that the best way to defeat an enemy was to let them think they'd already won. Let them get comfortable. Let them make mistakes. Tommy was at Westridge. That was actually perfect. Dr. Marsh would see immediately what Grant had always known. His son was brilliant, capable, and deserving of every opportunity. The staff would document Tommy's abilities, his personality, his potential, and they'd also document every interaction with Caroline and Cecilia. Grant dried off and lay down on the bed, mind racing through possibilities. He'd call Helen tomorrow, carefully, professionally. He'd start building his case with the precision he'd learned analyzing complex systems and human behavior patterns. He'd be patient, strategic. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Helen Marsh at Westridge. Your son arrived this morning. We need to schedule your intake interview and family assessment. Please call me tomorrow. Also, Grant, we need to talk. Some things aren't adding up here." Grant allowed himself a real smile this time. The game was already beginning, and his opponents had no idea they were playing. Tommy's bedroom was exactly as he'd left it: adaptive equipment, communication tablet on the charging station, walls covered with drawings Tommy had made using eye-tracking software. Grant stood in the doorway at dawn, coffee in hand, looking at the empty space where his son should be sleeping. His phone showed 6:47 a.m. when it rang. Helen Marsh's name appeared on the screen. "Helen, thank you for calling so early." "Grant, I'm breaking about 15 protocols talking to you before the official intake, but I need you to understand something. Your son arrived here yesterday with only his grandmother and mother. The grandmother did all the talking. She presented paperwork showing sole educational and medical custody, stated you were frequently absent and uncooperative with treatment recommendations." Grant's grip tightened on his coffee mug. "That's fabricated. I've never been anything but involved in Tommy's care. I assumed as much. Your name is on every medical release, every school document Tommy brought with him. More importantly, I remember you, Grant. I remember the man who spent 6 months developing communication protocols because he believed every child deserved a voice, regardless of their physical limitations. That man wouldn't abandon his son. What exactly did Cecilia tell you?" Helen's voice carried carefully controlled anger. She painted a picture of a father who treated his son's disability as a personal failure, who pushed Tommy too hard, who refused to accept his limitations, who made the family dynamics toxic with unrealistic expectations. She positioned this placement as a rescue mission. And you believed her? Not for a second. Which is why I'm calling. Grant, our intake protocol requires both parents to complete separate psychological assessments and interviews within the first week of placement. It's policy, no exceptions. Cecilia claimed you'd refuse, that you'd signed off on this placement but wouldn't participate in ongoing care. She lied. I was overseas when this happened. I came home to find my son gone, and my wife telling me it was already done. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, I need you to come to Westridge today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, before they have time to build a counter-narrative. Bring every document you have showing your involvement in Tommy's care, every medical appointment, every school meeting, every therapy session. Can you do that?" Grant was already moving toward his home office. "I'll be there by noon." "One more thing," Helen said quietly. "Tommy's scared, Grant. He keeps asking for you on his tablet. He's not the child they described at all. He's bright, engaged, trying to communicate with everyone. But he's 7 years old, and he doesn't understand why his father isn't here." The pain in Grant's chest was physical. "Tell him I'm coming. Tell him I didn't know where he was, but I'm coming." After Helen hung up, Grant sat at his desk, and pulled out the filing cabinet where he kept copies of everything related to Tommy. 5 years of documentation. Every diagnosis letter, every IEP meeting summary, every therapy progress note. Photos of him and Tommy at appointments, at the park, doing homework together. Grant had learned early that when you had a disabled child, you documented everything because you never knew when someone would question your competence as a parent. He'd never imagined he'd need this protection from his own wife. Grant spread the documents across his desk, organizing them chronologically. A pattern emerged that he'd been too close to see before. 6 months ago, right after Cecilia moved into the guest house following her husband's death, Caroline had started canceling couples therapy. She'd stopped forwarding Tommy's school emails to Grant. She'd begun making unilateral decisions about Tommy's care during the weeks Grant traveled for work. Grant pulled out his laptop and started a timeline. Every trip he'd taken in the past 6 months, every decision made while he was away, every time Cecilia had been present when Caroline discussed Tommy's needs. The manipulation was textbook. Isolate the target, control information flow, create a narrative where Grant was the problem. His office door opened. Caroline stood there in her robe, eyes narrowed. "Who were you talking to at this hour?" "Work," Grant said easily, not looking up from his laptop. "Project in Singapore has questions." "You're going back overseas already?" "Later this week." "What?" He met her gaze, keeping his expression neutral. Caroline's jaw worked like she wanted to say something, but was stopping herself. "Finally, Mother thinks we should start looking at couples counseling. She knows an excellent therapist." "Of course she does," Grant said. "I'm actually fine with that. But first, I need to go to Westridge. The facility requires both parents to complete intake interviews. They called this morning to schedule." The color drained from Caroline's face. "That's not. Mother said she handled everything. Apparently Westridge has mandatory policies about parental involvement. We both need to go up there, complete assessments, tour the facility with Tommy. It's standard procedure." Grant stood, gathering his documents into a briefcase. "I'm heading up there this afternoon. Do you want to come with me, or should I go alone?" "I'll talk to Mother first." Caroline practically fled from the room. Grant listened to her footsteps running down the hall, heard the urgent knocking on the guest house door. Within minutes, he heard raised voices. Caroline's panicked, Cecilia's sharp and commanding. They were scrambling, trying to figure out how to maintain control of a situation that was slipping away from them. Grant's phone buzzed with a text from his older brother, Jeremy Bright. "Heard Caroline's mother moved in with you guys. Everything okay?" Jeremy lived 2 hours away, worked as a prosecutor in the district attorney's office. They'd grown up close, but had drifted apart after Grant married Caroline. The Alexanders didn't encourage family connections with the Brights. They considered Grant's middle-class background unsuitable, tolerated only because Grant made good money and had elite professional connections. Grant replied, "Need to talk to you soon. Can you take a personal day tomorrow?" "Important." "Done. Come by tonight if you need." Laura's asking about Tommy. Laura was Jeremy's wife, a special education teacher who'd always adored Tommy and had been quietly furious about the way Cecilia treated him. Grant made a decision. He'd need allies for what was coming, people who could be trusted, who had professional credibility. He texted back, "Tonight. Don't tell anyone I'm coming." By the time Grant finished packing his briefcase, Cecilia was knocking on his office door. She entered without waiting for permission, her face arranged in what she probably thought was a reasonable expression. "Grant, Caroline tells me you're planning to drive to Westridge today. That's unnecessary. I can handle the administrative details." "Both parents are required, Cecilia. It's facility policy." "Yes. Well, I'm sure they can make an exception. I've already established a relationship with Dr. Marsh. Helen Marsh and I worked together 4 years ago," Grant said, watching Cecilia's carefully maintained composure crack. "I helped develop some of their assessment protocols. She's expecting me at noon." Cecilia's eyes went cold. "I see. How convenient that you failed to mention this connection before." "You failed to mention you were moving my son 3 hours away before doing it," Grant countered. "So I guess we're both full of surprises." "Your son," Cecilia said with a thin smile, "is exactly where he needs to be. Away from your constant pushing, your refusal to accept his limitations, your anger at having a defective child." "Finish that sentence," Grant interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "And you'll regret it. My son is not defective. My son is brilliant and capable and deserving of every opportunity in life." If you or anyone else in this house believes otherwise, then you don't belong anywhere near him. Cecilia drew herself up. Caroline is his mother. She has every right to make decisions about his care. If you try to interfere with this placement, if you try to turn Westridge against us, I'll make sure every family court judge in this state knows about your anger issues, your absences, your inability to accept reality. Document it, Grant said. I encourage you to try. After she left, slamming the door behind her, Grant sat back down at his desk. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from rage held in check. Cecilia had just made a critical mistake. She'd threatened him, revealed her willingness to lie in court, all while Grant's phone was recording in his pocket. He'd set up the recording app that morning, voice activated, constantly saving to the cloud. Every conversation in this house from this point forward would be documented. If Cecilia wanted to play dirty, Grant would bury her in evidence. He texted Helen, change of plans. I need to know, does Westridge record the intake interviews? Her response came immediately. Everything's recorded for training and research purposes. Both parents signed consent at the start. Why? Because I think my mother-in-law is about to provide us with a very interesting performance. Grant arrived at Westridge at exactly noon, having driven the 3 hours through beautiful upstate New York countryside that he couldn't appreciate. His mind was racing through scenarios, possibilities, potential outcomes. The facility was impressive, a converted estate property with modern additions, acres of accessible gardens, state-of-the-art equipment visible through windows. Helen Marsh met him in the parking lot, a tall woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp intelligence in her eyes. They shook hands formally, both aware that this interaction would be recorded by the security cameras. Mr. Bright, thank you for coming so promptly. Let's head to my office. Once inside with the door closed, Helen's professional mask slipped. Tommy's doing well, all things considered. But Grant, I need you to be prepared. His mother and grandmother did a number on him. They told him this was temporary, just for a few weeks while you were traveling. They didn't tell him this was supposed to be a permanent placement. Because Caroline knows Tommy would have fought it if he understood, Grant said. She manipulated him the same way she manipulates everything else. Helen pulled up a video file on her computer. This is from yesterday's arrival interview. Watch. The screen showed Tommy in his wheelchair, his communication tablet in his lap, Caroline sitting beside him looking uncomfortable, and Cecilia dominating the conversation. Helen's voice from off-screen asked Tommy questions, but before Tommy could use his tablet to respond, Cecilia interrupted. He can't really communicate complex thoughts, Cecilia said on the recording. The device is more for simple requests. Yes, no, bathroom, that sort of thing. On the screen, 7-year-old Tommy's face showed clear frustration. He typed something on his tablet, and the synthesized voice said, "Not true. I can say everything I think." Cecilia laughed, the sound condescending. See? He thinks he's communicating, but it's really just programmed responses. His father filled the device with phrases. Tommy doesn't actually understand what they mean. The look on Tommy's face, betrayal, hurt, anger, made Grant want to put his fist through the wall. Keep watching, Helen said quietly. The interview continued, with Tommy growing increasingly agitated as Cecilia described him as severely impaired, unable to handle regular classroom settings, disruptive to other students. Then Helen asked Caroline directly, "Mrs. Bright, do you agree with this assessment of Tommy's capabilities?" Caroline had hesitated, and in that pause, Grant could see her struggling. For a moment, he thought she might push back, might defend their son. Instead, she said, "My mother has more experience with these things than I do. I trust her judgment." And Tommy's father? What's his perspective? Grant refuses to accept reality. Cecilia interjected. He treats Thomas like a normal child, pushes him into situations where he's bound to fail, then gets angry when the inevitable happens. It's been very damaging to Thomas's self-esteem and to the family dynamic. Helen stopped the video. Now watch Tommy's response to that. She advanced to a section where Tommy was alone with a staff member, being shown his room. The staff member, a young man named Chris, sat down at Tommy's level and said, "Hey, Tommy, I bet this is scary, huh? New place, lots of strangers." Tommy typed, "Want my dad. Where is he? Your dad is traveling for work, right? Your mom said he'll visit when he gets back." Tommy's response took a full minute to type out, his motor control making each letter a deliberate choice. When the synthesized voice finally spoke, it said, "Dad doesn't know I'm here." Grandma said it's a surprise. Dad will be mad. Dad says I'm smart. Dad says I can do anything. Want to go home. Grant's vision blurred with tears he refused to shed. Helen handed him a tissue. That's when I knew something was very wrong, Helen said. No child Tommy's age constructs that coherent a narrative using AC unless they have significant cognitive ability. And the emotional intelligence, the understanding of family dynamics, the clear distinction between his grandmother's narrative and his father's. That's not a severely impaired child. That's a bright kid who's been systematically undermined. What do I need to do? Grant asked. First, you complete the intake assessment. I'll conduct it personally, on the record. Second, we schedule a family session with you, Caroline, and Cecilia for tomorrow. I want all three of you in a room with Tommy and our family therapist, recorded, where we assess the family dynamic. Third, you tell me honestly, is Tommy safe going home on weekends? Grant met her eyes. Physically? Yes. Emotionally? I'm not sure anymore. I thought Caroline was just overwhelmed, but watching that video, she's actively participating in diminishing him. I don't know if that's Cecilia's influence or if it's something deeper. Then we need to document everything. Because Grant, if this goes where I think it's going, you're going to need evidence that shows you're the parent who sees Tommy as a full human being with potential. And they're going to need to prove why you shouldn't have custody. The word hung in the air between them. Custody. Grant had never imagined his marriage ending, never thought he'd have to fight to maintain his relationship with his son. But standing here, seeing the evidence of how Caroline and Cecilia had manipulated Tommy, lied about him, warehoused him away, he knew what had to happen. Let's start the assessment, Grant said. And Helen, thank you for seeing him, for believing him. Every child deserves to be seen, Helen said. That's why I do this work. Now let's make sure the record shows exactly who your son is and who's been advocating for him all along. The intake assessment took 3 hours. Helen asked extensive questions about Tommy's birth, his diagnosis, his early intervention services, his educational history. Grant answered each one with specific examples, dates, names of therapists and teachers. He showed her the photos on his phone. Tommy at age 3 in his first adaptive stroller, Grant beside him at the park. Tommy at 5, using eye gaze technology for the first time, Grant's arm around him. Tommy last month, the two of them building an accessible Lego set together, both of them laughing. You documented everything, Helen observed. I had to. When Tommy was first diagnosed, Cecilia tried to convince Caroline to institutionalize him. Said he'd be better off in a facility where professionals could handle him. I had to prove, again and again, that Tommy could thrive at home with proper support. And that's been the pattern ever since. Cecilia undermines every bit of progress. When Tommy learned to use his communication device, she claimed it was just programmed responses. When he started reading, she said he was just memorizing shapes. When his teachers praised his cognitive abilities, she suggested they were being patronizing. She's been running a campaign to prove Tommy is more impaired than he is for 5 years now. Helen made notes. Why? Grant had thought about this a lot over the years. Control. Image. The Alexander family prides itself on perfection. A disabled grandchild is an embarrassment. An institutionalized grandchild is a tragedy she can wield for sympathy. But a disabled child who's thriving, being included, succeeding, that requires effort and challenges her worldview. And Caroline, why did she go along with this placement? I don't know anymore, Grant admitted. I thought we were partners. We struggled after Tommy's diagnosis. Every couple does. But I thought we'd found our rhythm. Lately, though, since her father died and Cecilia moved in, Caroline's changed. Or maybe she just stopped hiding what she always thought. When the assessment concluded, Helen walked Grant to Tommy's room. His son was with an occupational therapist, working on hand strengthening exercises. The moment Tommy saw Grant, his face transformed. Dad, the synthesized voice was loud enough to startle the therapist. Grant dropped to his knees beside Tommy's wheelchair, pulling his son into a hug. Tommy's arms came up awkwardly but with clear intent, holding onto Grant's neck. I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. Tommy pulled back, typing frantically on his tablet. The words came fast. Didn't know where you were. Grandma said surprise for you. This place is nice, but wanted to tell you first. Not mad at me. Never mad at you, Grant said fiercely. Tommy, listen to me. I didn't know you were coming here. I was traveling for work, and when I got home, you were already gone. Grandma and Mom didn't tell me. But I'm here now, okay? I'm going to figure this all out." Tommy's eyes, so like Grant's own, showed understanding beyond his years. He typed, "Grandma lies about me a lot." The therapist looked uncomfortable. Grant glanced at her, then back at Tommy. "Yeah, buddy. She does. But the people here, Dr. Marsh and everyone else, they're going to see how smart you are. They're going to see the real you. Can you show them that for me?" Tommy nodded, then typed, "Going home soon?" Grant's heart cracked. "We'll figure it out. I promise." He spent 2 more hours with Tommy, reading together, playing adaptive games, just being present. The staff observed everything, making notes. Grant didn't care. Let them document every interaction. Let them see what a father looked like when he actually loved his son. On the drive back, Grant called Jeremy. "I need your legal expertise. And I need to know, if I file for divorce and fight for custody, what are my chances?" His brother's response was immediate. "Come over now, Laura, and I will help you figure this out." By the time Grant pulled into Jeremy's driveway in a suburban neighborhood that felt like a different world from the Alexander estate property, the sun was setting. Jeremy and Laura Bright met him at the door, both of them radiating concern. "Tell us everything," Jeremy said. So Grant did. He told them about coming home to find Tommy gone, about Cecilia's machinations, about the video recordings Helen had shown him, about Tommy's message that "Grandma lies about me a lot." He told them about the years of subtle undermining, the way Cecilia had slowly isolated Caroline from Grant's influence, how he'd been too focused on work to see the pattern forming. Laura, who'd taught special education for 15 years, was visibly furious. That woman described Tommy as severely impaired. He's reading at a 5th grade level. He's been in inclusion classrooms. He has friends. She's been crafting a narrative, Jeremy said grimly. "Grant, this is textbook parental alienation. If she can make Tommy seem more disabled than he is, she can justify the placement. If she can paint you as in denial, she can justify excluding you from decisions. This is calculated. What do I do? Document everything. Which you're already doing, thank God. But we need to go further. I need you to get a custody attorney tomorrow. I'll recommend someone. File for divorce. File for primary custody of Tommy. And most importantly, file a motion to prevent Caroline from making any educational or medical decisions without your consent until the custody situation is resolved." "That's going to blow everything up," Grant said. "It's already blown up," Laura said gently. "They moved your son 3 hours away without telling you. That's not a marriage that can be saved, Grant. That's a battlefield, and Tommy's the prize they're fighting over. You need to make sure you're the one who wins." Grant spent the night at Jeremy's house, too exhausted to face Caroline and Cecilia. He called Caroline to tell her he was staying with his brother, citing work discussions. She didn't even sound concerned. "Mother thinks you might be having an affair," Caroline said. "She saw your phone records. Lots of calls to someone named Helen." Grant laughed, the sound bitter. "Helen Marsh is the director at Westridge. I've been coordinating Tommy's care. But thank your mother for going through my phone records without permission. That'll be useful in court." "Court?" Caroline's voice went shrill. "What are you talking about?" "Family session tomorrow at Westridge. 1 p.m. Dr. Marsh is expecting all 3 of us. You, me, and Cecilia. If you don't show up, she'll note it in Tommy's file. See you there, Caroline." He hung up before she could respond. Tomorrow, everything would be recorded. Tomorrow, Cecilia and Caroline would have to explain, on camera, to a professional family therapist, exactly why they'd moved Tommy without Grant's knowledge. They'd have to defend their assessment of his capabilities in front of people who'd already spent 2 days observing him. They'd have to lie to people who knew what the truth looked like. Grant finally allowed himself to feel the exhaustion, the grief, the rage. But underneath it all, there was something harder. Determination. Cecilia thought she'd won by moving Tommy to Westridge. Instead, she'd handed Grant a weapon, a stage, and an audience of mandated reporters who took child welfare seriously. Tomorrow, the real battle began, and Grant intended to make sure Tommy's grandmother regretted ever underestimating him. The family therapy room at Westridge was carefully designed to be non-threatening. Comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, natural light, neutral colors. Grant arrived early and met briefly with Dr. Helen Marsh and the facility's family therapist, a woman named Dr. Rita Santos. "Remember," Dr. Santos said, My job today is to observe family dynamics and assess Tommy's emotional well-being in context of his family relationships. I'm going to ask direct questions, and I need honest answers. The goal is to understand what's best for Tommy. Understood, Grant said. What will you be looking for specifically? Who speaks for Tommy? Who speaks over Tommy? Who makes assumptions about his abilities versus who asks him directly? How Tommy responds to each family member. Nonverbal cues. Power dynamics. She paused. And I'll be watching for any signs of parental alienation or manipulation. Caroline arrived exactly at 1 p.m., dressed in designer casual, where that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Cecilia was with her, wearing another perfect suit, her expression set in patient condescension. Neither of them expected to see Jeremy and Laura Bright sitting in the waiting area. What are they doing here? Cecilia demanded. Supporting their nephew, Jeremy said mildly. We won't be in the session, but we're here for Tommy. This is a private family matter. Which is why we're staying in the waiting room, Laura interrupted. But we're not leaving the building until we see Tommy. Dr. Santos emerged before the argument could escalate. Mrs. Bright, Mrs. Alexander, Mr. Bright, let's go ahead and get started. Tommy's waiting in the therapy room. Tommy was already positioned in the circle, his communication tablet ready, his eyes bright with intelligence that no one could deny once they spent 5 minutes with him. When he saw his father, his whole face lit up. When he saw Caroline and Cecilia, his expression shuddered, became guarded. Dr. Santos noticed. So did the cameras recording everything. Thank you all for coming, Dr. Santos began. Tommy, are you comfortable? Do you need anything before we start? Tommy typed, I'm good. Excellent. So, the purpose of today's session is to understand your family dynamics and make sure everyone's on the same page about your care, Tommy. Let's start with an easy question. Tommy, who do you want to answer first? I'll ask you something, and then I'll ask your family members to share their perspective. Tommy typed, Okay. Tommy, how do you feel about being at Westridge? Tommy's response took a moment. Place is nice. People are nice. But I miss my house. I miss my room. I miss my dad being there every night. When did you find out you'd be staying here? 2 days before. Grandma said it was a vacation place. Like camp. Didn't know I was staying all week. Dr. Santos turned to Caroline. Mrs. Bright, Tommy says he thought this was temporary, like camp. What was your understanding? Caroline shifted uncomfortably. We told him it was a trial period. That's not what Grandma said. Tommy typed immediately. She said I was staying here because I need special help that home can't give me. She said Dad would understand later. Cecilia's jaw tightened, but her voice remained smooth. Thomas misunderstood. His processing issues. Tommy, Dr. Santos interrupted gently. Do you feel like you misunderstood what your grandmother told you? No. I understand words just fine. Grandma thinks I don't, but I do. The room went silent. Dr. Santos made a note. Let's talk about your home life before coming here, Tommy. Who helped you with your homework? Dad. Every night when he was home. When he traveled, Mom helped sometimes, but Grandma said I was too much work. Did Grandma say that to you directly? Tommy hesitated, then typed. She said it to Mom. In the kitchen. I was in the living room, but I could hear. She said I was too much work and Mom deserved a break from dealing with me. Cecilia's face flushed. That's taken out of context. Mrs. Alexander, please let Tommy finish, Dr. Santos said. Tommy, is there more you want to share about that? Grandma says a lot of things about me when she thinks I can't hear. She tells people at church that I'm nonverbal, but I can talk with my tablet. She tells the neighbors that I don't understand anything, but I do. She makes me sound stupider than I am. The word stupider hung in the air. Grant wanted to reach over and hug his son, but he forced himself to stay still. Let this play out. Dr. Santos turned to Grant. Mr. Bright, what's your understanding of Tommy's cognitive abilities? My son is brilliant, Grant said simply. He reads at a 5th grade level. He understands complex math concepts. He has a sophisticated sense of humor. His cerebral palsy affects his motor control and his speech, but his mind is sharp. Anyone who spends real time with him knows that. And yet the intake paperwork describes Tommy as severely cognitively impaired with minimal communication abilities. Mrs. Alexander, you completed that paperwork. Can you explain the discrepancy? Cecilia's composure was cracking. I completed that paperwork based on Caroline's input and my observations. Grant has always been in denial about the severity of Thomas's condition. Grandma's lying. Tommy typed, the synthesized voice cutting through Cecilia's words. Dad's not in denial. Dad sees me. Grandma doesn't want to. Thomas, that's disrespectful, Cecilia started. Is it true or not true? Tommy typed back. Dr. Santos said honest answers. Dr. Santos was writing rapidly. Tommy, I want to ask you something important. Do you feel safe at home? The question clearly caught Tommy off guard. He thought about it, his face showing the concentration of someone choosing words carefully. Finally, he typed, safe from being hurt, yes. Safe from being sad because of mean words, no. Who says mean words to you? Not to me. About me. Grandma tells Mom that I'm never going to be independent, that I'm always going to be a burden, that they should have listened to the doctors who said to put me in a home when I was little. Mom doesn't say I'm wrong when Grandma says that stuff. Caroline made a small sound, almost a gasp. Grant looked at his wife and saw tears on her face, but he didn't know if they were from shame or from being exposed. Mom. Tommy typed, turning his wheelchair slightly toward Caroline. Why didn't you tell Grandma to stop saying that stuff about me? The question was so simple, so heartbreaking, that even Dr. Santos looked affected. Caroline covered her face with her hands. I didn't know you could hear, Caroline whispered. I'm in a wheelchair, not deaf. And even if I couldn't hear, you should have told her to stop anyway. Because it's not true. I'm not a burden. Dad says I'm a gift. Grant had to look away, his throat tight. He'd told Tommy that 100 times, 1,000 times, but he'd never known if his son truly believed it when the world seemed to constantly tell him otherwise. Dr. Santos let the moment sit, then continued. Let's talk about the decision to place Tommy here at Westridge. Mr. Bright, when did you learn about this plan? When I came home from a business trip 2 days ago. Tommy was already here. Caroline and Cecilia had moved him while I was overseas. And you weren't consulted? No. I wasn't even informed until after it was done. Dr. Santos turned to Cecilia. Mrs. Alexander, can you explain why Mr. Bright wasn't included in this decision? Grant is rarely home. He's always traveling for work. Someone had to make decisions. I travel approximately 1 week per month, Grant interrupted. I work from home the other 3 weeks. I attend every medical appointment, every IEP meeting, every parent-teacher conference. I'm the parent who knows all of Tommy's therapist's names, who coordinates his equipment maintenance, who troubleshoots his communication device when it glitches at 2 a.m. So please, explain again why I wasn't consulted about moving my son to a residential facility. Cecilia's eyes flashed with anger. Because you would have said no. You would have made this harder than it needed to be. You refuse to accept that Thomas needs more care than you can provide. What specific care does Tommy need that I'm not providing? He needs, Cecilia fumbled for words. He needs professional supervision. He needs to be around people trained to handle his outbursts. I don't have outbursts, Tommy typed. I get frustrated sometimes when people talk to me like I'm stupid, but I don't have outbursts. Dr. Santos looked at Cecilia. Has Tommy had documented behavioral issues at school or at home? Silence. Caroline finally spoke up, her voice small. No. He's generally a happy kid. Then I'm confused about the reasoning behind this placement, Dr. Santos said. Tommy is cognitively intact, emotionally regulated, and by all accounts thriving in his home environment with appropriate support. Westridge is a wonderful facility, but we typically serve children who need intensive therapeutic intervention or whose families cannot provide adequate care at home. From what I'm seeing, Tommy doesn't fit that profile. He needs to be with his peers, Cecilia tried. Other disabled children who understand him. I have friends at regular school, Tommy typed. They understand me fine. Disability doesn't mean I only want disabled friends. Grant watched his 7-year-old son dismantle his grandmother's arguments with simple truth, and he'd never been prouder. But he also saw the calculation in Cecilia's eyes, the way she was regrouping, looking for another angle. The cost of Tommy's care at home is unsustainable, Cecilia said finally. The equipment, the modifications, the therapy. Caroline can't manage it alone when Grant is traveling. I pay for all of Tommy's care, Grant said flatly. His equipment, his modifications, his therapy. I handle all the coordination with insurance and vendors. Caroline's involvement is minimal because that's how she wanted it. She said it was too stressful to deal with medical bureaucracy. Caroline flinched. Dr. Santos made another note. It seems to me, Dr. Santos said carefully, that we have a fundamental disagreement about Tommy's needs and capabilities. Mr. Bright sees Tommy as a capable child who needs specific support. Mrs. Alexander seems to see Tommy as more impaired and in need of institutional care. Mrs. Bright, you haven't said much. What's your perspective? Caroline looked between her mother and Grant, trapped. I don't know anymore. Mother was so certain that this was the right thing. She said Tommy would be happier here, that Grant was putting too much pressure on him to be normal. What pressure? Grant asked. Give me one example of me putting inappropriate pressure on Tommy. You make him do homework at grade level when he could have easier modifications, Caroline said. Because he reads at grade level. Why would I give him work below his ability? You took him to regular sports events when he could have gone to adaptive sports. He wanted to go to his friends' baseball games. He wanted to be included in normal activities. Was I supposed to tell him no because it might make you uncomfortable? The truth was coming out now, the real reason behind all of this. Not that Tommy needed institutional care. Not that Grant was unfit. But that having a visibly disabled child in normal spaces made Caroline and Cecilia uncomfortable. Made them face stares and questions. Made them feel less than perfect. Tommy had been sitting quietly, but now he typed something long enough that everyone waited. Finally, the words came. I don't want to stay here. I want to go home with Dad. This place is nice, but it's not my home. My room is at home. My stuff is at home. My life is at home. I'm sorry if I embarrass Mom and Grandma, but I can't help being disabled. I didn't choose this. And I don't think I should have to hide away because it makes them uncomfortable. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Santos set down her pen and looked at each adult in turn. I think we're done for today, she said. I'll prepare my assessment for Tommy's file. But I want to be clear with all of you. Tommy has clearly expressed his desire to go home and his awareness of the family dynamics at play. That will be a significant factor in any recommendations I make about his placement. Cecilia stood abruptly. I don't appreciate the implication that I've done something wrong here. Everything I've done has been for Thomas's benefit. Grandma, Tommy typed, and something in the way the synthesized voice said it made everyone stop. Please just stop. I know you think you're helping, but you're not. You're hurting me, and you're hurting Dad. And I think you're hurting Mom too, because she used to be nicer before you moved in. Out of the mouths of babes, Grant thought. His 7-year-old son had just articulated what Grant had been unable to put into words for 6 months. Dr. Santos escorted them out. In the waiting room, Jeremy and Laura immediately stood up. Laura went straight to Tommy, dropping to her knees beside his wheelchair. Hey, kiddo. We missed you. Tommy's face lit up. Aunt Laura. He typed. Did you bring Uncle Jeremy? Right here, buddy. Jeremy ruffled Tommy's hair. We were thinking maybe you could come stay with us this weekend, if your dad thinks that's okay. Grant met his brother's eyes and saw the offer for what it was, a safe space for Tommy while Grant dealt with the legal fallout. That sounds great. Tommy, would you like that? Yes. Uncle Jeremy has the game system with the adaptive controllers. As Tommy talked excitedly with his aunt and uncle about weekend plans, Grant pulled Dr. Santos aside. What happens now? I write up my assessment. It'll be in Tommy's file. If this goes to court, and Mr. Bright, I think it will, that assessment will be available. I'll also be flagging some concerns about parental alienation and making a report to Child Protective Services, not because Tommy is being physically abused, but because there's evidence of emotional manipulation and potential educational neglect in the form of inappropriate placement. Will that report help me get custody? It'll help establish a pattern. Combined with the video recordings from intake and today's session, it paints a clear picture. She paused. Grant, that's a remarkable child you have. He's self-aware, articulate, and emotionally intelligent. Whatever you've been doing as a parent, keep doing it. After everyone left, Grant took Tommy outside to the facility's gardens. They sat together on a bench, Tommy's wheelchair beside him, both of them looking at the sunset. Dad, Tommy typed, are you and Mom getting divorced? Grant had never lied to his son about important things. I don't know yet, buddy. Maybe. Because of me? No, Grant said firmly. Never because of you. Because sometimes adults make decisions that hurt the people they're supposed to protect. And when that happens, other adults have to make hard choices to keep everyone safe. Tommy thought about that. Will I still see Mom? Of course. Whatever happens, she's still your mom. Even if she let Grandma be mean about me? Grant's heart hurt. Even then, People make mistakes, Tommy. Sometimes big ones. Mom made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. She has a funny way of showing it, Tommy typed. Then, Dad, I'm glad you found me. I was scared you wouldn't come. I'll always come for you, Grant promised. Always. That night, Grant met with the attorney Jeremy recommended, a woman named Rita Coleman who specialized in family law and disability rights. He brought all his documentation, all his recordings, the reports from Dr. Santos and Helen Marsh. Rita reviewed everything, making notes. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Bright, I'm going to be honest with you. In normal circumstances, judges are reluctant to remove a child from the mother's custody. But these aren't normal circumstances. Your wife conspired with your mother-in-law to move your disabled son to a residential facility without your knowledge while you were out of the country. She signed legal documents giving educational and medical decision-making power to someone else. She's allowed a third party to systematically undermine your son's capabilities and your role as a parent. And all of this is documented. Can we win? Not just win. We can bury them. I'll file for divorce tomorrow, emergency motion for custody, and a restraining order preventing any further educational or medical decisions without your consent. With this evidence, I can have Tommy home with you within a week. What about Caroline? What happens to her? Rita's smile was sharp. That depends on how hard her mother fights and how dirty she's willing to play. But Mr. Bright, you've done everything right. You've documented everything. You've been present. You've advocated for your son. If they fight this, they're going to have to explain to a judge why they thought it was appropriate to move a thriving child to institutional care without the father's knowledge. That's not a fight they can win. Grant left the attorney's office feeling something he hadn't felt in days: hope. Real, solid hope. Cecilia had thought she was so clever, moving Tommy to Westridge. She'd thought she'd backed Grant into a corner. Instead, she'd put his son in the care of professionals who saw the truth, who documented everything, who would testify on Grant's behalf if needed. Sometimes, Grant thought, the best revenge was simply letting your enemies destroy themselves with their own actions. And Cecilia Alexander, in her arrogance and cruelty, had done exactly that. The legal papers were filed on Thursday morning. Caroline was served at the house at 10 a.m. by a process server who handed her the divorce petition, the emergency custody motion, and the restraining order preventing any educational or medical decisions regarding Tommy without Grant's explicit written consent. Grant wasn't there to see her reaction. He was at Jeremy's house, having moved his belongings out in the early morning hours while Caroline and Cecilia were still asleep. Everything he needed fit in his car: clothes, laptop, personal items. Everything that mattered was already with him: his documentation, his evidence, and his son's unconditional love. His phone started ringing at 10:15 a.m. Caroline, 27 missed calls. Then Cecilia's number. Then Caroline again. Grant let them all go to voicemail. Rita had been clear: no contact except through attorneys. Every word from this point forward was potential evidence. At noon, Helen Marsh called. Grant, I thought you should know. Mrs. Alexander just called demanding that Tommy be released to her custody immediately. She's claiming you've kidnapped him. What did you tell her? That Tommy is a resident of Westridge under a signed placement agreement, and changes to custody arrangements must go through proper legal channels. She threatened to sue. I told her to have her attorney contact our legal department. She did not take that well. Grant could imagine. Cecilia Alexander was used to getting her way through force of personality and family money. Being told no by people who couldn't be intimidated must be infuriating. How's Tommy? Honestly, he's been happier these past 2 days than he was when he first arrived. He's engaged with his therapy, laughing with the staff, showing off his reading skills. It's like a weight has been lifted. Grant, I know residential placement is supposed to be about giving kids specialized care, but in Tommy's case, I think it's giving him space from a toxic family dynamic. That's going to change soon. Rita's pushing for emergency custody within the week. Good. Keep me posted. And Grant, whatever you're planning, I hope it involves making sure that woman never has unsupervised access to Tommy again. The comment surprised him. Helen was usually so professional. You really don't like Cecilia, do you? I've been doing this work for 25 years, Helen said. I've seen a lot of difficult family situations. But there's a difference between parents who are struggling and parents who are cruel. Cecilia Alexander looks at your son and sees an embarrassment to manage. That's not love. That's narcissism. And narcissists don't suddenly develop empathy when confronted with their behavior. They just get better at hiding it. After they hung up, Grant sat in Jeremy's backyard with his brother, both of them drinking coffee in the afternoon sun. "You doing okay?" Jeremy asked. "I'm about to blow up my entire life. My marriage is ending. I'm fighting for custody of my son, and I'm about to make an enemy of one of the wealthiest families in the state. So no, not really okay. But Tommy will be okay. That's what matters." Is it always this ugly? Divorce. Jeremy, who'd prosecuted enough family violence cases to know the worst of humanity, shook his head. Not always. Some people manage to split amicably, put their kids first, act like adults. But when there's a power imbalance, when one party is used to controlling everything, yeah, it gets ugly. They don't see divorce as the end of a relationship. They see it as a loss of property. Cecilia sees Tommy as property. Damaged property that reflects badly on the family brand. Then it's a good thing you're taking him away from her. Jeremy paused. "Grant, I need to tell you something. I did some digging into the Alexander family finances. Cecilia's spending patterns since her husband died are concerning." "How so?" "She's been moving money around. Large amounts. Richard Alexander's estate was worth about $12 million. Cecilia inherited most of it, with trusts set up for Caroline and the grandchildren. But in the past 6 months, she's transferred nearly $2 million out of the main accounts into a series of LLCs that she controls." Grant sat up straighter. Why would she do that? Could be legitimate estate planning. Or she could be hiding assets in anticipation of a legal fight. If she thinks you might go after her money in a custody battle, she'd want to make it look like she has less than she does. "Can you prove it?" "Not my area of expertise, but I know a forensic accountant who could, if you want to pursue it." Grant thought about it. Cecilia had used her money as a weapon for years. The threat of cutting Caroline off, the promise of trust funds for Tommy if they did things her way, the implication that Grant couldn't provide the same lifestyle. If her finances were questionable. "Set up a meeting with the forensic accountant," Grant said. "And Jeremy? Thank you. For everything. That's what family does. Now come on, Laura's making her famous chili for dinner, and she's been stress baking all day. We have approximately 70 cookies that need to be eaten." On Friday morning, Rita called with news. Judge Paulson agreed to an emergency hearing Monday at 9 a.m. Caroline's attorney filed a counter motion claiming you abandoned the marital home and are trying to alienate Tommy from his mother. The judge wants to hear from both parties and review the evidence before making a temporary custody decision. What are our chances? With the video evidence from Westridge? And the documentation of your involvement versus Caroline's? I'd say 80% in our favor. But Grant, you need to be prepared. Caroline's attorney is Marcus Webb. He's expensive, he's ruthless, and he specializes in high-asset divorces. He's going to paint you as an unreasonable father who can't accept his son's disabilities and who's weaponizing the legal system against a grieving widow and her daughter. Cecilia is hardly grieving. Doesn't matter. It's a narrative that plays well. Wealthy widow trying to help her struggling daughter care for a severely disabled grandchild, opposed by an absent father with a hero complex. Webb will make it sound sympathetic. Then we counter with the truth. Tommy's not severely disabled. Caroline's not struggling. She's choosing not to parent. And I'm not absent. I'm the only one who's been actually present in Tommy's life. That's exactly what we'll do. But Grant, be ready. They're going to come at you hard. The weekend passed in a strange bubble. Grant visited Tommy at Westridge both days, bringing books and art supplies, just spending time together. Tommy seemed to sense something big was happening, but didn't push for details. They talked about school, about Tommy's friends, about what games they'd play when Tommy came home. When I come home, Tommy typed on Saturday afternoon, "Can we redecorate my room? Maybe make it more grown-up." "Absolutely. Whatever you want." "And Dad, can we not invite Grandma over for a while?" The question was so carefully phrased, so polite despite the enormity of what Tommy was really saying, that he didn't feel safe around his own grandmother, that Grant had to take a moment before responding. "Buddy, Grandma's not going to be coming over. Not for a long time." Tommy's relief was visible. "Good. She makes everything feel bad, even when she's pretending to be nice." On Sunday night, Grant lay awake in Jeremy's guest room, mentally preparing for court. He'd worn suits in corporate boardrooms, negotiated with government officials, given presentations to hostile audiences. But tomorrow felt different. Tomorrow, He'd be fighting for his son's future against people who were supposed to love Tommy as much as he did. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Caroline. Please, can we talk before court? Just us. No lawyers, no mother. Please." Grant stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to ignore it, follow Rita's instructions about no contact. But another part, the part that had loved Caroline once, that had chosen her as his partner, that had made a child with her, wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was finally seeing clearly. He texted back, "Neutral location. Public place. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. The coffee shop on Main Street." Her response was immediate. "Thank you." Monday morning came too quickly. Grant arrived at the coffee shop at 6:55, ordered black coffee, and sat where he could see the door. Caroline walked in at exactly 7 a.m., dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her hair down, no makeup. She looked younger, more vulnerable, nothing like the polished Alexander woman she usually presented. She sat down across from him without ordering anything. "Thank you for meeting me. You have 10 minutes, Caroline. Talk. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Moving Tommy without telling you, signing those papers, letting Mother manipulate everything." She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. "I'm not asking you to drop the divorce. I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you not to completely take Tommy away from me. Then you shouldn't have tried to take him away from me first. I know. God, Grant, I know. I don't even know what I was. Confused? Overwhelmed? Mother was so certain she knew what was best, and after Dad died, I couldn't think straight. She made everything seem so logical, so reasonable. Tommy needs more care than we can give. You're always working. A facility would be better equipped." It all made sense in the moment. Did it make sense when you saw how scared Tommy was? When you heard him ask for me? Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "No. That's when I knew we'd made a terrible mistake. But Mother said he'd adjust, that children are resilient, that he'd thank us later. And I wanted to believe her because the alternative was admitting I'd hurt my own son. You did hurt him. You told him he wasn't good enough to live at home. You told him his disability was too much. You let your mother tell him he was broken. I know." The tears were falling now. "I watched that video from Dr. Santos. The one where Tommy says I let Grandma be mean about him. And he's right. I did. I've been letting her undermine him for 5 years because it was easier than standing up to her. Because some part of me..." She broke off, covering her face. "Some part of you what?" "Some part of me resented him," Caroline whispered. "For not being perfect. For being hard. For making me feel like a failure as a mother because I couldn't fix him. And Mother fed that resentment. She made it seem reasonable, justified. But Grant, I see now what I've done. I see who I've become. And I hate myself for it." Grant should have felt vindicated. He'd wanted Caroline to understand, to acknowledge her failures. But sitting across from the woman he'd once loved, watching her fall apart, he just felt tired. "What do you want from me, Caroline? I want you to have primary custody. I want Tommy to live with you. But please, please don't cut me out completely. Let me have visitation. Let me try to rebuild what I've destroyed. I'll go to therapy. I'll set boundaries with Mother. I'll do whatever the court requires. Just don't take my son away forever. Tommy deserves better than a mother who resents him. I know. And I'm going to work every day for the rest of my life to become the mother he deserves. But Grant, I'm begging you, don't use the legal system to punish me by taking away my chance to try." Grant sipped his coffee, thinking. Rita would tell him to show no mercy, to push for full custody with minimal visitation. Every custody attorney would say the same. But Grant wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting for Tommy's well-being. "Here's what's going to happen," he said finally. "I get primary physical and legal custody. All major decisions about Tommy's care, education, and medical treatment go through me. You get supervised visitation, supervised by someone I trust, not your mother, until you complete a parenting program focused on disability awareness and prove you can put Tommy's needs first. Your mother gets no unsupervised access to Tommy until he's old enough to decide for himself if he wants a relationship with her." Caroline nodded quickly. "Yes, all of that. I'll agree to all of it. And one more thing. You tell your attorney that you're not going to fight the custody arrangement. You tell your mother that you're done letting her control your life and your son's life. If I see any sign that Cecilia is still pulling strings, all visitation stops immediately. I will. I promise. Don't promise me, Caroline. Promise Tommy." Because he's the one you hurt. He's the one you need to make this right with. Caroline stood up, looking more resolute than Grant had seen her in years. I'm going to tell Marcus Webb to withdraw the countermotion. And I'm going to tell Mother that I'm moving out of the house, getting my own place, and if she wants any kind of relationship with me going forward, she needs to respect my boundaries, which include not interfering with Tommy's custody arrangement. Grant watched her leave, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something shift. Maybe not hope exactly, but possibility. The possibility that Caroline could change, could become the mother Tommy deserved. It wouldn't happen overnight, and it would require work, but the fact that she was willing to try mattered. At 9 a.m., Grant sat in family court with Rita Coleman on his right and Jeremy in the gallery behind him. Caroline sat across the aisle with Marcus Webb, and notably, Cecilia was nowhere to be seen. Judge Paulson, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and the demeanor of someone who didn't tolerate nonsense, reviewed the paperwork. I've read both motions and the evidence provided. Before we proceed, I understand there's been a development. Marcus Webb stood. Your Honor, after discussion with my client, Mrs. Caroline Bright has decided to withdraw her countermotion and agrees to the custody arrangement proposed by Mr. Bright. We've drafted a consent agreement for the court's review. The judge looked surprised but pleased. Mrs. Bright, you understand that this agreement gives your husband primary physical and legal custody of your son, with you receiving supervised visitation pending completion of a parenting program? Caroline stood. Yes, Your Honor. I understand. And I agree. My son's well-being is more important than my pride. Judge Paulson reviewed the consent agreement, made a few notes, then signed it. Very well. The agreement is entered. Mr. Bright, you have primary custody of Thomas Bright effective immediately. Mrs. Bright, you'll work with the court-appointed supervisor to establish a visitation schedule. I'm also ordering family therapy for all parties, including Thomas, to ensure we're supporting his emotional needs through this transition. She looked up at both of them. I'll be honest with you both. I see a lot of ugly custody battles in this courtroom. Parents who weaponize their children, who care more about winning than about what's best for the kids. This isn't that. Mrs. Bright, I commend you for putting your son's needs first. Mr. Bright, I commend you for being willing to allow continued maternal contact despite what must have been a very painful betrayal. Thomas is lucky to have at least one parent who always kept his best interests at heart, and potentially two if Mrs. Bright follows through on her commitments. After court, Rita pulled Grant aside. You know you could have gotten everything, right? Full custody, minimal visitation, the works. Why did you let her off easy? Because Tommy loves his mother, even if she's hurt him. And because maybe, if she does the work, she can learn to be the parent he deserves. Taking away all hope of that doesn't help Tommy. It just makes me vindictive. Rita smiled. You're a better person than most of my clients. Let's hope Caroline proves worthy of that generosity. Grant drove straight to Westridge. Helen Marsh met him in the lobby with a smile. I heard the news. Congratulations. Thanks to your documentation and Dr. Santos's assessment. We couldn't have done this without Westridge. We document because it's good practice. But Grant, I'm glad it helped. When do you want to take Tommy home? Is today too soon? Helen laughed. Let me get his discharge paperwork started. And Grant, bring him back for outpatient therapy. He's made good progress here, and I'd like to continue supporting his development. Absolutely. When Tommy saw Grant walking toward his room, he lit up. But when Grant said, Hey buddy, ready to come home? Tommy's expression shifted through confusion, hope, and disbelief in rapid succession. Really? For good. For good. You're coming home with me today. Tommy's whole body seemed to lift with joy. He typed frantically. Is Mom coming too? No, buddy. Mom's going to have her own place for a while. But you'll see her regularly. And it's going to be you and me, just like you wanted. And Grandma. Not for a long time. Maybe not ever, depending on how things go. Tommy thought about that, then typed. I'm sad about Mom. But I'm happy about everything else. Is that okay? Grant pulled his son into a hug. That's absolutely okay. You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated situations. That's what makes you human. They packed up Tommy's room together, loaded everything into Grant's car, and drove away from Westridge. As they headed south toward home, Tommy typed a long message. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. When we get home, can we make cookies? And can we watch that space documentary you told me about? And can we just Be normal for a while. No fighting, no crying, no big serious talks. Just cookies and TV and being okay. Grant's throat tightened. Yeah, buddy. We can do exactly that. They stopped at the grocery store and bought cookie ingredients. Chocolate chip, Tommy's favorite. At home, the new home Grant had found. A ranch-style house with fully accessible features and a yard where Tommy could navigate easily. They mixed dough together. Grant did the manual parts. Tommy directed operations from his wheelchair with his tablet. More chocolate chips, Dad. The recipe says 1 cup, but we should do 2. That's basically cookie dough-flavored chocolate at that point. Exactly. What's your point? Grant laughed and dumped in extra chocolate chips. They made a mess of the kitchen, ate raw cookie dough despite Grant's half-hearted protests about salmonella, and burned the first batch because they got distracted by the space documentary. It was imperfect and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Cecilia Alexander did not take defeat gracefully. The first sign came 3 days after Grant brought Tommy home, when his attorney Rita called with a warning. Cecilia's filed a grandparents' rights petition. She's claiming that you're denying her access to Tommy and that it's harmful to their relationship. She's also alleging that you're poisoning Tommy against her. Grant, who was helping Tommy with homework at the kitchen table, felt his blood pressure spike. She has no relationship with Tommy to harm. She spent 5 years undermining him. I know, and that's what we'll argue. But Grant, she's hired an attorney even more expensive than Marcus Webb, Victor Kane. He's known for taking scorched earth approaches to family law cases. This isn't going to be easy. What does she want? Unsupervised visitation every weekend and joint decision-making authority on Tommy's medical and educational needs. Grant laughed, the sound bitter. She wants custody by another name. Essentially, yes. The hearing is in 3 weeks. We need to prepare. After hanging up, Grant found Tommy watching him with worried eyes. Was that about Grandma? Yeah, buddy. She wants to be able to see you every weekend. Tommy's response was immediate. No, I don't want that. Even if it means we have to go to court again. Tommy typed for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. Grandma never made me feel good about myself. She always made me feel like I was broken and wrong. I don't want to spend every weekend feeling broken and wrong. I'm not broken, Dad. You taught me that. But Grandma doesn't believe it. Then we'll fight it. But Tommy, you might have to talk to the judge about how you feel. Would you be okay with that? Tommy nodded. If it means Grandma can't force me to see her, I'll talk to 100 judges. Over the next 3 weeks, Grant worked with Rita to build their case. They had Dr. Santos's assessment from Westridge, documentation of Tommy's progress, and most importantly, they had Tommy's own voice. At 8 years old, Tommy was old enough that a judge would listen to his preferences, especially given his clear cognitive abilities. Jeremy came through with information from his forensic accountant contact. They met in Grant's new living room. Papers spread across the coffee table while Tommy did homework in his room. Cecilia's been moving money around for 8 months, the accountant, a sharp-eyed woman named Susan Park, explained. She's created 4 LLCs, all with vague names like Alexander Family Trust Management and RMA Holdings. She's transferred nearly $3 million through these entities. Is that illegal? Grant asked. Not inherently, but the timing is suspicious. It started right after her husband died, accelerated 6 months ago when she moved in with you and Caroline, and peaked last month right before you filed for divorce. She's also made several large cash withdrawals, $50,000 here, $75,000 there. Cash is hard to trace. Jeremy leaned forward. What would someone use cash like that for? Could be anything. Legitimate business expenses, charitable donations, or... Susan paused meaningfully. Payments to people you don't want showing up in bank records. Grant's mind raced. Like what? Private investigators? Someone to sabotage my custody case? Or doctors willing to write reports stating Tommy is more impaired than he is? Or therapists willing to testify that you're psychologically unfit? Or people to dig up dirt on you? Susan pulled out another document. I also found something interesting. Cecilia made a $100,000 payment to a company called Riverside Consulting Services 2 weeks before Tommy was moved to Westridge. What's Riverside Consulting? On paper, it's a healthcare consulting firm. But I did some digging. The owner is a man named Dr. Marcus Raymond. He's a licensed psychologist, but his license is under review for ethical violations. Specifically, for providing biased expert testimony in custody cases. Grant felt cold. She paid someone to write a psychological assessment of me? That would be my guess. And given the timing, she probably has a report ready to present at the grandparents' rights hearing. A report that makes you look unstable, unfit, dangerous. Rita, who'd been listening intently, spoke up. If we can prove she commissioned a fraudulent psychological evaluation, that's grounds for sanctions. Possibly even criminal charges for fraud. Susan, can you trace that payment definitively? Already did. Bank records show the transfer from one of Cecilia's LLCs to Riverside Consulting. I also found email correspondence between Cecilia and Dr. Raymond discussing concerns about Thomas's father and documentation needs for legal proceedings. How did you get her emails? Grant asked. Susan smiled. I didn't. Her attorney did, as part of discovery for the divorce case. They're required to turn over financial records and communications related to Tommy's care. Cecilia's attorney probably didn't read them carefully enough to realize what she'd documented. Jeremy whistled. She just handed you the weapon to destroy her credibility. Question is, Rita said, do we use it now at the grandparents' rights hearing, or do we save it for the divorce proceedings? Grant thought about it. We use it now. We end this once and for all. I don't want to spend the next 5 years fighting Cecilia in court. I want Tommy to be able to grow up without her shadow hanging over him. Then we'll need Tommy to testify, Rita said. Grant, I know you don't want to put him through that. I'll do it. Tommy's voice, synthesized but clear, came from the hallway. He wheeled into the room, his expression determined. I heard what you were talking about, and I'll talk to the judge, because Grandma needs to know she can't buy her way into controlling my life. Grant had never been more proud and more heartbroken at the same time. His 8-year-old son shouldn't have to testify against his own grandmother. But Tommy was right. This needed to end. The grandparents' rights hearing was held in the same courtroom where Grant had won custody. Judge Paulson presided again, and she looked distinctly unimpressed as Cecilia's attorney, Victor Kane, made his opening statement about a loving grandmother being cruelly denied access to her only grandchild. Mrs. Alexander has been instrumental in Thomas's care since his diagnosis, Kane argued. She's provided financial support, emotional support, and practical help to a struggling family. To deny her the right to maintain a relationship with her grandson is not only cruel, but harmful to Thomas's well-being. Rita's response was surgical. Your Honor, Mrs. Alexander has been instrumental in Thomas's care the way a wrecking ball is instrumental in construction. She spent 5 years systematically undermining Thomas's confidence, denying his capabilities, and pushing for institutional placement. The documentation will show that Mrs. Alexander's interest in Thomas has nothing to do with his well-being and everything to do with control. King called Cecilia to the stand first. She was perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, playing the role of grieving widow and concerned grandmother. She testified about her late husband's love for Tommy, her own commitment to his care, the sacrifices she'd made to support Caroline in raising a disabled child. I only want what's best for Thomas, Cecilia said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I've loved that boy since the day he was born. Grant has turned him against me, told him lies. Mrs. Alexander, Rita interrupted during cross-examination. You referred to Westridge as a special facility when you moved Thomas there. Can you describe what you told the intake coordinator about Thomas's capabilities? Cecilia hesitated. I provided an honest assessment of his limitations. You described him as severely cognitively impaired, minimally communicative, and unable to function in regular educational settings. Is that an honest assessment of a child reading at 5th grade level? The reading level is inflated. Grant pushes him beyond his actual abilities. Do you have any educational or psychological training that would qualify you to assess whether Thomas's reading level is inflated? I've observed him for 8 years. That's not what I asked. Do you have training? No, but... And when you described Thomas to Dr. Marsh at Westridge, you stated that his communication device was programmed with simple responses and that Thomas didn't understand what the phrases meant. Were you present when Thomas's AAC device was programmed? No. Have you ever asked Thomas's speech therapist about his communication abilities? I didn't need to. I could see. Mrs. Alexander, yes or no? Have you consulted with any of Thomas's therapists or teachers about his actual capabilities? Cecilia's composure was cracking. Grant handled all of that. Because you weren't interested in Thomas's actual progress. You were interested in maintaining a narrative that he was more impaired than he is. What? I wasn't. That's not. Rita pulled out a document. This is an email you sent to your daughter 4 months ago. Quote, Thomas will never be independent. We need to plan for long-term institutional care. The sooner Caroline accepts this reality, the easier the transition will be. Why were you pushing for institutional placement for a thriving 8-year-old? He wasn't thriving. He was struggling, and Grant refused to see it. Struggling how? Specifically, Cecilia fumbled. His progress was slow. He needed more support. His IEP reports show consistent progress meeting all goals. His teachers described him as engaged and capable. His therapists reported excellent cooperation and advancement. So again, Mrs. Alexander, where was Thomas struggling? The silence stretched. Judge Paulson leaned forward. Mrs. Alexander, answer the question. He struggled with being normal, Cecilia finally said, her voice sharp. He struggled with fitting in. Every time we went out in public, people stared. Every time Caroline had to lift him or manage his equipment, people watched. He was a spectacle, and it was affecting the entire family. Rita let that sit for a moment. So when you say Thomas was struggling, you mean you were embarrassed by his disability? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You found Thomas's visible disability embarrassing, and you wanted him placed in a facility where you wouldn't have to deal with public reactions. That's not about Thomas's well-being. That's about your comfort. Kane objected, but the damage was done. Cecilia's real motivation was now on record. Rita introduced the documentation from Westridge, the videos showing Tommy's capabilities and Cecilia's misrepresentations. She introduced the emails where Cecilia pressured Caroline to agree to placement. And then, Rita dropped the bomb. Your Honor, we've also discovered that Mrs. Alexander commissioned and paid for a psychological evaluation of Mr. Bright without his knowledge or consent from a psychologist currently under investigation for ethical violations. She handed up Susan Park's financial documentation and the emails between Cecilia and Dr. Raymond. Judge Paulson's expression went from disapproving to furious as she read. Mrs. Alexander, did you pay Dr. Marcus Raymond $100,000 to prepare a psychological assessment of Grant Bright? Cecilia looked at her attorney, who looked blindsided. I consulted with Dr. Raymond about family dynamics. You commissioned a fraudulent psychological evaluation to use in custody proceedings. That's not consulting. That's attempted fraud upon the court. Your Honor, Kane interjected, we were unaware of this payment. That doesn't excuse it. Mrs. Alexander, do you have this alleged psychological evaluation? Cecilia's silence was answer enough. Judge Paulson set down the papers. I'm going to hear from Thomas now. Bailiff, please bring him in. Tommy entered the courtroom in his wheelchair, Grant's brother Jeremy, pushing him. Tommy wore a button-down shirt and looked small but determined. The bailiff lowered the witness stand microphone, and Tommy positioned his communication tablet on the stand's surface. Judge Paulson smiled at him, her expression gentling. Hi, Thomas. I'm Judge Paulson. You're not in any trouble, okay? I just want to ask you some questions about your family. Do you understand? Tommy typed. Yes, ma'am. How old are you, Thomas? 8. But everyone calls me Tommy. Okay, Tommy. Do you know why we're here today? Tommy typed a long response. When it played, the courtroom went silent. My grandmother wants to force me to visit her every weekend. But I don't want to visit her. She makes me feel bad about myself. She tells people I'm more disabled than I am. She tells my mom that I'm a burden. She tried to put me in a home where I'd live all the time instead of with my dad. I'm here because I want to tell you that I don't want to see my grandmother. She's mean, and she lies, and she doesn't love me the way I actually am. She only likes the idea of me if I was different. Judge Paulson's eyes were suspiciously bright. That's very clearly stated, Tommy. Can you tell me about your dad? Tommy's face lit up. My dad is the best person I know. He never treats me like I'm broken. He helps me do everything I want to do. He reads with me and plays games with me and takes me places even when people stare. He tells me I can do anything if we find the right way to do it. He makes me feel like being disabled doesn't mean being less. My dad loves me exactly how I am. And your mom? Tommy's expression became more complicated. My mom made mistakes. She let Grandma convince her I needed to go away. But I think maybe she's trying to fix it. I'm mad at her, but I don't hate her. I just need time. What about your grandmother? Tommy's response was immediate. I don't trust her. She smiles at me, but says mean things about me when she thinks I can't hear. She hugs me, but tells my mom I'm too much work. Everything she does feels fake. I don't want to spend weekends with someone who makes me feel like I have to apologize for existing. The synthesized voice delivered the words without emotion, but the meaning was devastating. Cecilia sat rigid in her chair, her face white. Judge Paulson asked a few more questions about school, about friends, about what Tommy wanted for his future. Tommy answered each one thoughtfully, demonstrating the cognitive abilities Cecilia had denied he possessed. When Tommy wheeled out of the courtroom, Judge Paulson turned back to the attorneys. I've heard enough. Mrs. Alexander's petition for grandparents' rights is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering supervised visitation only if and when Tommy requests it, which may be never. Mrs. Alexander, you commissioned fraudulent evidence, misrepresented your grandson's disabilities, and prioritized your own comfort over his well-being. Those are not the actions of a loving grandmother. Those are the actions of a manipulative person who views her grandchild as an object to control. Cecilia stood abruptly. Your Honor, you can't. I can and I am. This hearing is concluded. Mr. Bright, take your son home. Mrs. Alexander, I strongly suggest you reflect on your behavior before attempting any further legal action, because if you come before me again with this kind of documented misconduct, I'll refer the matter to the State Bar for investigation into your attorney's conduct, and possibly to law enforcement regarding fraud. Outside the courtroom, Grant found Tommy with Jeremy and Laura. Tommy looked drained but relieved. Did I do okay? He typed. Grant pulled him into a hug. You did perfect. You were brave and honest, and I'm so proud of you. Is Grandma going to leave us alone now? I think so, buddy. I really think so. They were walking to the parking garage when Cecilia appeared, Victor Kane beside her. Grant, please. Can we talk? There's nothing to talk about, Cecilia. I'm still Tommy's grandmother. You can't just cut me out. Watch me. Grant kept walking. I could appeal. I could take this further. Grant turned back, his voice cold. You could. And I could release to the media all the evidence of your fraud, your manipulation, and your financial irregularities. Your late husband's business partners might be very interested in what you've done with his estate. The society page might enjoy knowing that the Alexander family matriarch commissioned fraudulent psychological evaluations. Your choice. Cecilia's face went through several expressions before settling on impotent rage. You'll regret this. No, Grant said. I really won't. Tommy, say goodbye to your grandmother. Tommy typed one word, goodbye. They left Cecilia standing in the parking garage, her attorney looking uncomfortable beside her. As they drove away, Tommy typed a long message. Dad, do you think Grandma will ever understand that she was wrong? I don't know, buddy. Some people can't see past their own needs and expectations. But here's what I know. You don't have to wait for her to understand. You can move on, grow up, become whoever you want to be, with or without her approval. Her limitations don't have to limit you. Tommy thought about that. I feel bad for her. Being that mean all the time must be exhausting. Grant laughed, surprised by his son's empathy. Yeah, buddy. I bet it is. 3 months later, Grant stood in Tommy's new classroom, watching his son present a project to his third-grade class. Tommy had designed an adaptive game controller using simple coding and modifications to an existing device. His presentation explained the problem. Many games weren't accessible to people with motor control issues. His solution, remapping buttons and adding alternative input methods, and his demonstration, playing a video game using eye tracking and voice commands. The other kids asked questions. Tommy answered each one with patience and expertise. His teacher, a young woman named Mrs. Patterson, beamed with pride. After school, Grant met Caroline at a coffee shop, their monthly check-in as mandated by the custody agreement. She'd completed the parenting program, moved into her own apartment, and was slowly rebuilding her relationship with Tommy through supervised visits. He's doing amazing, Caroline said, showing Grant photos from last weekend's visit. She'd taken Tommy to an adaptive rock climbing gym, both of them in harnesses, both of them laughing. He climbed to the top of the wall. Grant, I never knew he could do something like that. He can do lots of things if he's given the chance. I know. I'm seeing that now. She paused. Thank you for not giving up on me. For letting me have another chance with him. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Tommy. He deserves a mother who sees him. I'm working on it. Every day. Caroline pulled out an envelope. I wanted you to have this. It's a letter I wrote to Tommy, but I'm not ready to give it to him yet. I'm using it in therapy, working through everything I did wrong. But I want you to keep it, just in case something happens to me, so he knows I understood what I did and that I was sorry." Grant took the letter, tucking it away. "Are you okay?" "That sounds ominous." "I'm fine. Just realistic about the fact that actions have consequences. Mother's not speaking to me. The family's ostracized me for betraying them by agreeing to the custody arrangement. I've lost most of my friends. Starting over at 35 is hard. But you're doing it." "Yeah, I am." She smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Grant had seen from her in years. "It's weird. I have so much less than I did 6 months ago. But I'm happier. Lighter. Like I've been carrying this heavy thing for years, and I finally put it down. That thing was your mother's expectations. And my own shame about Tommy. And my fear of being less than perfect." Caroline looked down at her coffee. "The Alexander family is big on appearances. Being perfect, looking perfect, hiding anything that might make us seem weak. Tommy's disability shattered that illusion, and instead of adjusting my worldview, I tried to hide him away so I could maintain the lie. That was monstrous." "Yeah," Grant agreed. "It was. But you're facing it now. That counts for something." They talked for another hour, carefully rebuilding something that wasn't quite friendship but was no longer adversarial. When they parted, Grant felt something unexpected, hope that maybe Caroline would find her way back to being the woman he'd once loved, even if they could never go back to being married. At home, Tommy was doing homework at the kitchen table, Jeremy helping him with math word problems. Grant's brother had become a regular presence, stopping by several times a week, being the uncle Tommy deserved. "Dad," Tommy called out when Grant entered. "Uncle Jeremy says he'll take me to the baseball game this weekend if you say it's okay. The stadium has adaptive seating and captioning for the announcements." "Sounds great, buddy." After Jeremy left, Grant and Tommy settled in for their evening routine. Dinner, reading time, Tommy's physical therapy exercises, then a show they both liked about space exploration. Ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they'd been so close to losing them. "Dad," Tommy said during a commercial break, "do you think I'll ever walk?" It was a question Tommy rarely asked, had learned not to ask because too many adults gave him false hope or condescending pity. But Grant had always tried to give honest answers. "I don't know. Your doctors say probably not without significant medical intervention, and those interventions come with risks. But here's what I know. You don't need to walk to be complete. You're already whole, already capable, already everything you need to be. But sometimes I wish I could, just to see what it's like. To run, to jump. Normal stuff. I know, buddy. And it's okay to wish for things, to feel sad about what cerebral palsy took from you. But don't let that sadness make you forget everything you have. You're brilliant, creative, kind, brave. You stood up to your grandmother in court. You teach your friends about accessibility. You're making a difference in the world, Tommy. Walking or not walking doesn't change that." Tommy nodded, processing. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever regret having me? Like, if you could go back and know that your kid would be disabled, would you still want me?" Grant felt his heart break and heal at the same time. "Tommy, look at me. I wouldn't change a single thing about you. Not your disability, not your challenges, not one moment of the journey we've been on together. You are exactly who you're supposed to be, and I am so grateful every single day that I get to be your dad. You're not a burden. You're not a tragedy. You're my greatest joy." Tommy's eyes were wet, but he was smiling. "Even when I wake you up at 2 a.m. because my leg spasms? Even then. Even when I take forever to type something and you have to wait. Even then. Tommy, being your dad has taught me patience, creativity, advocacy, and unconditional love. You've made me a better person. So no, I don't regret a thing. And anyone who can't see what an incredible human you are doesn't deserve to be part of your life." Tommy wheeled closer and hugged Grant fiercely. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, buddy. Always." Later that night, after Tommy was asleep, Grant stood in the doorway of his son's room, watching him breathe peacefully. The room was filled with evidence of Tommy's personality: books, art projects, his communication tablet charging on the nightstand, adapted game controllers, a poster of the solar system. Grant thought about everything they'd been through. Cecilia's manipulation, Caroline's betrayal, the court battles, the fear of losing Tommy to institutional placement. But standing here, seeing his son safe and happy, Grant knew it had all been worth it. Cecilia had tried to weaponize Tommy's disability against him. Instead, she'd exposed her own cruelty and lost everything: her relationship with her grandson, her credibility in court, her control over Caroline. The facility she'd chosen to warehouse Tommy away had become the place that documented his capabilities and vindicated Grant's advocacy. Sometimes the best revenge wasn't elaborate or dramatic. Sometimes it was just living well, raising your child with love and dignity, and watching your enemies destroy themselves with their own choices. Grant's phone buzzed with an email from Helen Marsh. Subject line: Tommy's progress report and some news. Grant, the email read, I wanted to update you on Tommy's continued progress in our outpatient program. He's exceeded every goal we've set and is testing well above grade level in reading and math. His adaptive technology skills are so advanced that we've asked if he'd be willing to help us test new equipment. With your permission, of course. On another note, you should know that Dr. Marcus Raymond's medical license was suspended yesterday. It turns out your mother-in-law wasn't the only person he sold fraudulent evaluations to. There's a criminal investigation ongoing, and several of his previous cases are being reviewed. Your decision to expose that connection may have helped a lot of families. Also, Cecilia Alexander contacted me last week asking for copies of Tommy's records from his time here. I denied the request, as she's not listed as an authorized party. She threatened legal action. I told her to proceed if she wishes, as we have nothing to hide, and I'd be happy to testify about my interactions with her. She hung up. Keep up the good work with that amazing kid of yours. He's going to do great things. Grant smiled and texted back a thank you. Then he forwarded the email to Rita Coleman, just in case. You never knew when you'd need documentation. The next morning, Grant woke to find Tommy already awake, typing on his tablet at the kitchen table. You're up early, buddy. Couldn't sleep. I was thinking about something. Tommy turned his wheelchair to face Grant. I want to write a blog. About being a disabled kid, about my experiences. Mrs. Patterson said I'm a good writer. And I think maybe other kids like me would like to know they're not alone. Grant sat down, struck by his son's empathy and emotional intelligence. That's a great idea. We'd need to be careful about privacy, use a pseudonym maybe. But yeah, I think you could help a lot of people with your story. Can we call it Wheels and Words? Like, my wheelchair and my communication device. Perfect. Let's set it up this weekend. Over the following months, Tommy's blog gained followers. Other parents reached out, other disabled kids, teachers looking for perspective. Tommy wrote about adaptive technology, about dealing with ableism, about the things that made him feel seen versus the things that made him feel invisible. He wrote about his grandmother, not naming her, but describing the experience of having family members who couldn't accept his disability. One post went viral. I don't need to be fixed. I need to be supported. There's a difference. Grant watched his son find his voice, his platform, his purpose. And he thought about how Cecilia had tried so hard to silence Tommy, to make him small and manageable. Instead, she'd given him a story that resonated with thousands of people, an example of overcoming family rejection, a reason to help others. 6 months after the grandparents' rights hearing, Susan Park called with final news about Cecilia's finances. The IRS is investigating her for tax fraud, Susan reported. Those cash withdrawals and hidden LLCs? She didn't report any of it. She's looking at significant penalties, possibly criminal charges. And the estate attorney for her late husband's business found that she'd been systematically draining accounts that were supposed to be held in trust for charitable foundations. There are civil suits coming. Is any of that my concern? Grant asked. Not unless she tries to come after you for more custody challenges. But Grant, between the tax fraud, the civil suits, and the criminal investigation into Dr. Raymond's activities where she's named as a co-conspirator, Cecilia is going to be busy defending herself for years. She won't have time or resources to bother you and Tommy. Grant thanked Susan and hung up. He probably should have felt vindicated, triumphant even. But mostly he felt tired. Cecilia had built her own trap and walked into it. He hadn't had to do anything except document the truth and protect his son. On Tommy's 9th birthday, they threw a party at the Adaptive Recreational Center, rock climbing, wheelchair basketball, a gaming tournament with all accessible equipment. Tommy's friends from school came, kids with and without disabilities, all of them just being kids together. Caroline showed up with a thoughtful gift and stayed to help supervise. earning small smiles from Tommy. Jeremy and Laura were there, along with Helen Marsh and some of the staff from Westridge who'd become friends. Cecilia was not invited and did not attend. As Grant watched Tommy laughing with his friends, using his communication device to trash talk during the gaming tournament, he realized this was what victory looked like. Not his ex-mother-in-law in handcuffs or his ex-wife groveling. Just his son, happy and thriving and surrounded by people who saw him for who he was. That night, after everyone had left and Tommy was asleep, Grant pulled out Caroline's letter. He'd never opened it, kept it sealed in his desk drawer. But tonight, he felt ready. Dear Tommy, it began. By the time you read this, I hope I've already told you all of these things in person. But just in case I haven't, just in case I lose my courage or lose my chance, I need you to know. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about your capabilities, about what you deserve from a mother. I let fear and shame and your grandmother's manipulation convince me that your disability was something to hide, to fix, to apologize for. I tried to make you smaller so I could feel more comfortable. That was unforgivable. You are not broken. You never were. Your cerebral palsy is part of you, but it doesn't define you. You are brilliant, creative, brave, and kind. You are everything a mother could hope for in a son. And the fact that I couldn't see that I let your grandmother convince me otherwise, is my greatest failure. Your father saw you from day one. He advocated for you, believed in you, fought for you when I was too weak to do the same. He's the parent you deserved. I'm trying to become that parent too, but I know I have years of damage to undo. I'm sorry, Tommy. For every time I made you feel less than. For every time I let your grandmother speak poorly of you. For moving you to Westridge without telling your father. For not being strong enough to stand up for you when you needed me most. I hope someday you can forgive me. But even if you can't, know that I see you now. All of you. And I'm in awe of the person you're becoming despite my mistakes, not because of anything I did. You deserve better. You deserve better. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to give you that. Love, Mom. Grant folded the letter back up, feeling something complicated for Caroline. She'd hurt Tommy, betrayed their family, made terrible choices. But she was facing those choices now, doing the work, trying to change. That took courage too. Maybe that was the real lesson in all of this. People could change if they chose to. Caroline chose to face her failures and grow. Cecilia chose to double down on her cruelty and control. And Grant, he chose his son. Every time, in every way. That's what being a parent meant. In his room, Tommy slept peacefully, surrounded by birthday gifts and evidence of a life filled with love and possibility. Outside, the world was full of challenges he'd have to face. Ableism, barriers, people who wouldn't see his worth. But he'd face them with his father beside him, teaching him that disability didn't mean defeat, that different didn't mean less, and that sometimes the people who tried to diminish you ended up destroying themselves instead. Grant returned the letter to his desk drawer, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow was a new day, with new opportunities for Tommy to shine and prove to the world exactly what 8 years of unwavering parental advocacy could build. And somewhere across town, Cecilia Alexander sat in her empty mansion, surrounded by lawyers and legal documents, facing the consequences of a lifetime spent trying to control and diminish others. The facility she'd chosen to warehouse her grandson away had become the instrument of her downfall. Tommy's voice, which she'd tried to silence, had echoed in a courtroom and sealed her defeat. Her own actions, documented and preserved, had destroyed her credibility and exposed her cruelty. She tried to trap Grant by moving Tommy to Westridge. Instead, she trapped herself with her own machinations. And there was a beautiful, perfect justice in that. Sometimes you didn't need elaborate revenge. Sometimes you just needed to let the truth speak for itself and let your enemies destroy themselves with their own poison. Grant fell asleep thinking about Tommy's blog post that had gone viral. I don't need to be fixed. I need to be supported. It was a lesson Cecilia had never learned. But Tommy had learned it. Caroline was learning it. And together, they'd all move forward, some toward growth and healing, others toward the consequences of their choices. And in the end, that's exactly how it should be. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.